Robert P. Russell of 3301 Spanish Trail, apartment 404A, Delray Beach, Florida, 33483. Bob's phone number is area code 407-278-8390. The recording was made on January 12, 1989 at Bob's home by Jim Walkinshaw of the Oldsmobile History Center. This is tape number 1 of 2 tapes. Bob, if you could just start us with your name and address and phone number, please.
My name is Robert P. Russell, 3301 Spanish Trail, apartment 404A, Delray, one word, Beach, Florida, 33483.
And your phone?
Phone number is 407-278-8390.
Okay. Now, if you could just go back to the point where you started in General Motors Institute and tell us a little bit about what was the program at that time and about when that was.
Well, I was fortunate enough to complete 3 years of pre-law at the University of Wisconsin, but I had to get a job in the Chevrolet assembly plant in my hometown, and was fortunate enough there to be invited to go to the General Motors Institute for a period of 4 years.
Okay. What was the program at that time, Bob? What did you have to do as a student?
Well, as a student, we had a considerable amount of mathematics, which I enjoyed. We had fabulous instructors. The classes were small, so each student got all the attention required to successfully pass the course.
Was that a going to school sort of situation?
Yes, it was. From our plant was in Wisconsin, so we alternated work and school on an 8-week basis.
Okay.
8 weeks working and 8 weeks in Flint, Michigan at the General Motors Institute.
Okay. And you were aiming for a technical degree, an engineering degree?
Yes.
Okay.
There were several different course options there. Dealer service was one of them, I remember, and diesel engines, I believe, was the other one. But I wanted to straight general engineering.
Where did you stay and how did you stay in Flint?
Well, we were very fortunate in Flint. There was a very fine couple right across the street from the school that rented my associate from Chevrolet and myself a room while we were in Flint. And when we would return back to Wisconsin, the other 2 students from the Chevrolet plant took the room.
Okay, so you just alternated back and forth.
Yeah. We were very fortunate to do that because it was really very difficult to get rooms. It was difficult to find a place to eat. I don't want to be derogatory here, but the food, I shouldn't.
So that's okay.
The food at the school was terrible.
Wasn't the greatest. I remember
it was the worst. It was the worst. But there was a very nice lady that on the other side of the campus served meals. And we managed to have enough money between us, my roommate, myself, and the other 2 fellows to pay her for one meal a day, which we ate at noon.
Mhm. Did you make enough during the working sessions to put you through school? Generally?
No,
No.
no.
Okay.
I worked piece rate at Chevrolet in the paint department, 68 cars an hour, and got 68 cents an hour.
Okay.
Piece rate. The minute I started going to school, I was reduced to 40 cents an hour,
Mm.
and they didn't pay for our transportation.
Mm-hmm.
Other Chevrolet plants around the country did.
Oh, so yours was different.
Ours was different, and they refused to
Okay.
help us out. The bus cost $11 each way between Janesville, Wisconsin, and Flint. And it's pretty hard to thumb a ride in the wintertime in Wisconsin.
Yeah, sure. It's cold too. You graduated then in what, 39?
Graduated in 39,
All right.
and
Was there a fifth year program at that time, or was that just a?
no, there was not a fifth-year program
All
at
right.
that time that I'm aware
A
of.
thesis thing.
The thesis thing came along about a year or two later,
All right.
and I was pretty busy working then.
Yeah.
And I didn't see much sense in it anyway.
Yeah.
We had to have a thesis before I could graduate. And between the general manager of the Chevrolet plant and myself, I made a floor plan layout of an ideal automobile assembly plant.
Oh, okay.
That was the thesis
Yeah.
we had in those days that I know of.
Yeah. Is that somebody at your door?
Yeah.
Can we
No, shut
shut that off? Okay, we're back on again.
Yeah.
Okay, so you did do a thesis then in the assembly process sort of thing.
Yes.
Mhm. And then where did it, oh, excuse me, go ahead.
Later on, I was notified that I could get a 5-year course because it was my understanding, because the Navy was not accepting graduates at that time as full college graduates.
Okay.
And I figured 3 years at the University of Wisconsin majoring in math and economics, and 4 years at the General Motors Institute, I had enough education.
That's a long stretch. What did they put you to work doing then after you graduated, Bob?
Thought you were going to ask me something else, and I don't know whether you want to get into it or not. But when this 40 cents an hour they paid us when we were working,
Yes.
we were in the labor problem period
Okay.
with the UAW.
Yeah, the formation.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
whatever it's called. And my partner and myself had no trouble with the people at all, and we worked in plant engineering in the plant engineering shop, repairing forklift trucks
Oh, okay.
and the machine tools, hand tools,
Mm-hmm.
power tools, and we weren't bothered.
Okay. So that never, the strike business and that sort of thing never really affected you as a student?
Yeah, it did. It didn't last the full
Oh,
strike period.
all right.
It only lasted about half the strike
All right.
period. And that was quite a setback financially.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
No money from home. But then I don't recall exactly what year it was, but my friend and I used to work along the assembly line for people that were ill or didn't show up for the job.
Kind of fill in.
So yeah, we were fill-ins, and it turns out that there was an epidemic of mumps and scarlet fever going on, And when I returned to Flint, Michigan, about 3 weeks, I developed the mumps
Oh, gosh.
and missed a little school, but was able to make up for it and stay with it.
Mhm. Okay, now when you graduated,
And,
did you stay in plant engineering?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that was the engineering part of it.
Mhm.
In 39, and worked in plant engineering, and we had our own powerhouse. This is a big operation.
Yeah.
And extensive conveyor changes and tooling changes. We handled all the tooling and the assembly fixtures, and worked in the tunnels where the steam
Steam tunnels?
tunnels,
Uh-huh.
huge because it serviced Fisher Bay.
Yeah, yeah.
And I learned a great deal. And then I had my appendix attack and lost 3 weeks of work, but I wound up back on the job at Chevrolet in the parts department of the plant engineering.
All right.
Made a complete inventory of every tool, every part that was in there.
Mhm.
Special screws, nails, brackets, you name
Okay.
it. And that was very beneficial. Very beneficial to the background. And when I finished school, we had a near a catastrophe where the coal hopper for the powerhouse was rusting to pieces. I don't recall how many tons of coal it carried, but it was enormous. And we had to get the original drawings made in the late teens and reproduce them on the drawing board.
Oh, redraw them.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and they were afraid the whole thing would collapse and put the powerhouse out of business.
Mm-hmm.
That was huge, and I got along real well there. I'm proud of the accuracy and the speed that I did it. And so when I got finished, I moved out of the shop and got on the drawing board.
Okay.
And started designing the work that I was going to have performed during the model changeover.
All right. Now the war hadn't come yet. No war. The war wasn't here yet. World War II.
That's
okay.
right.
All right.
Yeah,
So we're still making cars.
still making cars.
Okay.
And come up with some pretty good ideas. Our conveyor floor drives were underground, and our elevation compared with a relatively large river was too low.
Uh-oh.
So we rigged up a system of identical pits, and we could connect and disconnect the electric pump motors and get them out of there by means of the forklift truck
Mm-hmm.
motor. And
Yeah,
doing
big
that
power.
there.
Yeah.
But we put hooks in there,
Mm-hmm.
because if you lost one, you'd have to wait 6 weeks to get them. And you wouldn't build a car.
Right.
But the December the 2nd came, which changed the picture.
1941.
1941
Yeah.
changed the picture for everyone.
What happened there?
Well, we had a very outstanding plant manager by the name of Tom Downey. And he hustled around trying to find out some war products that we could manufacture to keep the people working and help the war effort. And it wasn't in my realm to know how he became associated with Mr. Skinner, Sheriff Skinner.
Mm-hmm.
what he did, and Mr. Skinner made a visit to our plant and talked to all of us. There was only 4 engineers in the whole place. And he told us what he thought he could do for us. And he did, and then the word came about 2 weeks later approximately that Bob Pottlesack, Robert Pottlesack, and myself jumped on the train and spent the next 5 or 6 weeks in Flint, or in Lansing, Michigan.
What were you doing there?
We were working, we made plant layouts, and Pottlesack and I did. And then I spent most of my time working with the production engineering men from the Oldsmobile division.
Okay.
Who knew more about tooling than I did.
Yeah.
And machining. And it was a very, very interesting activity.
What were the products that you were working on?
We had, originally we had 3 products: the famous 105 millimeter shell, and a 3-inch armor piercing shell. And for a short period of time, we had a solid steel 3-inch shell.
Mm-hmm. Now that was all machining?
We had a tool up for those 3 products. And get out to the manufacturers and take the samples that were made in the tool room. The 3-inch armor piercing shell was a very special one. The other one was a smaller diameter and was measured in millimeters. I don't know the exact, can't recall the right number.
Did those 3 shells fill the whole plant from a standpoint of using it?
Yes. Yeah.
What did you do?
It worked well.
What did you do with all the machinery that was there for cars?
Well, the operation was conducted in the Fisher body plant.
Oh.
Because it was easy, very easy to simply remove their conveyors.
Okay.
And what little relatively small welding devices out of the way.
Okay.
The shell activity took place in the Fisher body building.
And the rest of it just laid there idle, so to speak.
The Chevrolet plant was used as a parts and service warehouse.
Okay.
And
car parts?
Yeah.
Car parts.
Car parts. Car and truck. Chevrolet car and truck. Yeah.
What was that part? Were both parts of that under the direction, so to speak, of Oldsmobile, or just the shell production?
The shell production was under the charge of Oldsmobile.
All right.
And Chevrolet retained control of the Chevrolet parts
Right.
activity.
Okay.
And there was a lot of traveling and a lot of work and getting the tools, machine tools made, learning more about detail of cutting tools, and many tours to the fabricating plants that made the machine tools proper.
Were the Oldsmobile process engineers working back and forth between?
No,
just you.
Just me. And the same thing was true of the inspection equipment and basic machines that were ordered from Lansing. Did a very good job, but we made some modifications in process that improved things significantly. One of them with the 105 millimeter shell, instead of holding it in a circular device around the outside of it, to keep it symmetrical and maintain its balance for proper accuracy, I had the tool machine manufacturer put a fixture that went up inside of the shell forging. And that established the main center line.
Mm-hmm. That kind of
So it's symmetrical, yeah. And for other activities where we had, they were called taco machines, if I remember it correctly, electrical heat treating devices. And this was used in conjunction with the armor-piercing shells, which had a cap on them, which was extremely hard. And that's what would break up the guarding material on the outside of the German tanks.
Mm-hmm.
And many trips down to Aberdeen for proof firing.
So you actually saw some of the shells fired?
Oh yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I carried them down there in suitcases.
How much did those things weigh?
God,
It's okay.
I forget what they weighed, but the 105s, we used to carry them under our arms.
Okay, but they weren't a 5-pound thing. It's your
No, they weren't. They were no, and it was very difficult traveling around.
Yeah.
The only airline trip we made was to Cleveland, or from Cleveland, from the Taco Machine Company.
Mm-hmm.
And first commercial airline I ever had. And they closed up the windows as we neared Chicago because of the steel mill.
Yeah.
And most of it was, I'd say 90% of it was by rail car.
Was it? Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but we converted a couple of machines from one type of process to another to produce a more accurate shell.
Okay. All the machinery was new, basically?
Brand new,
Uh-huh.
yeah. There wasn't anything basic about any of it.
Right.
And
Did that start just immediately on, in essence, December 2nd, when we started that process?
oh no, this was the following spring.
This was the spring?
Yeah, we were in Flint in the spring.
All right.
And I've been trying to think of the month that Pottlesack and I went over there. We had to talk to Mr. Downey because I was an hourly employee,
Mm-hmm.
working 90 hours a week and 98 hours one week. But he gave full permission.
Yeah. Did you remain an hourly employee through that whole process?
Yeah.
Oh, darn.
Until I put in the 98 hours.
Yeah.
And then I get a letter. I get a wire the next day. You're on salary.
Got tired of paying it, didn't they?
They sure did.
Yeah.
That check must have blown the comptroller off in the chair. But getting from the hotel in Lansing, I'm trying to recall the name of it, out to the Oldsmobile forge plant.
Is that where
That's where
your
place
forgings
was.
were made?
No, we made them at our own, but
Oh,
that's where this engineering group.
Oh, okay.
We used the office.
You were
there.
located there.
Yeah.
You were doing engineering work. All
Yeah.
right. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. And you made your own forgings back in Janesville?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
They dug up 3 or 4 old forging machines
Uh-huh.
that were laying in the sand near Chicago on Lake Michigan, cleaned them up, brought them up to Janesville and put them in the building. And
Uh-huh.
interesting to note that the paint sprayers became the operators of these machines.
Isn't that
Yeah.
interesting? From a very fine...
I think because of the sensitivity.
Uh-huh.
You know, they're just common hammers. You don't push a button.
Yeah.
Yeah, tum like
Yeah.
that. Gotta be right. And but it was all hard work, and we even got a huge press from Chevrolet to cut the bar stock for the billets, for the forgings.
Mhm. Was that a big round stock that you were working with?
No, it was square,
Square, uh-huh.
and wanted to have it broken square.
Yeah.
The squares you could get.
Or you
Yeah.
sheared it or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That press was as high as this,
Oh, yeah.
and everything shook with it. We thought it was going to last, and Chevrolet was wondering if we were wrecking their press. We ran them out of the plant. wasn't worth keeping anyway.
Did Skinner then get over to that plant on occasion, or?
Yes, yes. He had John Dykstra was the general manufacturing manager of Oldsmobile at that time. And that's when I first met him. And he used to come over, and I was in meetings with Mr. Dykstra and Mr. Downey.
Downey was still at your plant?
Oh, yeah. He was there all through the...
All right.
And then he went to Lansing.
Okay.
There was another man that managed the Oldsmobile forge plant in Lansing, and I'm sorry that I can't recall his name. He was in some of the meetings with Mr. Skinner, but particularly with Mr. Dykstra. And it's very nice to get well acquainted with Mr. Dykstra.
Mm-hmm. What kind of a person was he, Bob?
Well, and he was a real engineering mechanic.
All right.
Engineering trained mechanic.
Uh-huh.
He knew manufacturing.
Was he an outgoing individual?
Dynamic.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Kind of an outgoing sort of guy.
Yeah.
And you could talk with him without him getting upset, or so to speak.
That's right.
Uh-huh.
Most of us could.
Yeah.
He had his own way, but it was his basic responsibility to make the thing work.
Yeah.
Now this is from the Lansing standpoint.
Yes, he came from Lansing there to see what was. Did Downey report to him then?
Well, no, Donnie, if you had a chart,
yeah,
it might show that in the beginning, but in the end, Donnie talked directly with Skinner.
Did he? Okay.
Yeah. And Skinner talked directly with Downey.
Mm-hmm. What kind of a person was Downey?
Well, he was, he spent more time in the shell plant than any other three human beings put together. Wow. He was there, and this was a 7-day-a-week, 24-hour day operation, 3-shift operation. And he was there on every shift.
He was?
Every time.
How did he do that? Wow.
He did it.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. Well, he was with Chevrolet and Flint. Yeah. I don't know. I think he was, I don't know what department he was in, but it was in Flint because he had a home there in Kettering. But he was a wonderful man. And we won an E award.
Which meant what?
That was an award the federal government gave a war material operation, a reward that can be flown.
Is that because of high quality?
High quality, timely performance.
All right.
And then during the war, I had a lot of contacts with the government. Trying to think of the name of them now. Offices in the Chicago district.
All right.
Yeah. See, these machines were bought in the Michigan district.
Oh.
And they should have been bought in the Chicago ones, and there was a big rhubarb about that. But Downey got it straightened out. And Mr. Skinner helped, I'm sure.
Did you have a lot of women in the plant, Bob?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Wives.
So that the
Mothers?
yeah, the plant was more run by women than men?
No, there were more men, but
There were still more men. Uh-huh.
Well, these shells were very heavy,
Mhm.
but there were little women carried,
Pushing them around, huh? Uh-huh.
putting them up on the truck.
Yeah,
God damn, it's really something.
yeah, yeah.
And you see, when you take a 5,000 person operation out of business in a town with a population of about 20,000, it's catastrophe.
Right?
And we had a very successful cooperation in the ordnance office in Chicago, Illinois. Everything went very well.
Now that lasted all until the war ended?
Till the war
We
ended.
kept doing that, building those same three sort of things?
No, we went through approximately 16 different kinds of operations.
All right.
The solid shell was discontinued, of course, because it wasn't any good anyway. It bounced off like a PB. And but the volume kept going up. The need for shells kept going up. And then we had this disaster in the woods of Germany where the American Army had a retreat and blow up all the 105 millimeter shells that they could possibly do. And then the need for those shells was staggering. And they went back into the warehouse, the government warehouses, and we had to correct the shells that were in the warehouses for years, years. And we developed a system of sandblasting them to take the paint off and then the tool marks around the outside of them, which you couldn't tolerate. And then putting in new pure copper band.
Okay. This was kind of a reclamation project.
Yeah. I forget the number of them, but there were thousands upon thousands upon thousands. The thing was you couldn't chuck those shells up. They had tool marks, tool thread marks all around them, and they'd be going out of a gun like that or a gun up. And I conceived the idea, and Lloyd Pierce and myself conceived the idea, and talking with one of the foremen, to put one of the darn things in a sandblaster, and that blasted the forgings that come up from the forge before the machine, and it cleaned off those surfaces real well. You didn't have to do any further machining. And occasionally you'd find a shell that had a what's the timer on it?
Oh, the fuse?
It had the fuse in it. We found a few of those, but fortunately found them in time. Some of them some of these shells, you had to look them over pretty carefully, but you could tell by the weight of them were already had the powder in.
Oh, gracious sake. Dangerous.
And it was caked and everything else, and went back. But it was all very interesting, and finally finally the war ended.
Okay, then what?
Well, the Chevrolet Detroit representative was hustling around the office area, talking with Bob Bottlesack, I know from seeing him. And so I went in and talked with Mr. Downey, and I said, it seems everybody in the place has got a plan. You know, we had VJ Day that had a plan. And he says, you got one too? I said, yeah. I said, I want to go to work for you. And that's when he told me he had an opportunity to go back with Chevrolet and a plant up in Bay City, Michigan. They were after him, and then the corporation was after him to get into the, what's the name of the forging unit that it got changed a couple of times?
The Detroit Forge?
No,
Oh,
the big one. Most of it was done down in Illinois.
oh, yeah. Why?
And
anyway,
he turned that down because somehow he had a contact with Mr. Skinner, and Mr. Skinner says, I want you to work for me.
okay.
So, but he couldn't tell me that at first, but about a couple of weeks later, he says, well, you ready to move from Lansing? And he said, yes, sir.
Okay, so you two kind of came together, so to speak.
Yes, along with Lloyd Pierce.
All right.
Have you got his name?
No, well, I got
have
it, but I don't have him, however.
No, but Lloyd went, and we're all very happy.
Was Bob Rollison amongst that bunch somewhere?
Oh, yes, I should have mentioned Bob.
All right.
Yes, Bob was in it.
All right.
Bob was in the Chevrolet inspection department.
Okay.
And he handled the inspection department of all the shell manufacturing.
Oh, all right.
And he did a very great thing. Found out, can't think of the name of the company, but the shells had to be very accurate or their trajectory would be wobbly and
Yes.
if it moved at all. And he made a trip to California where these new measuring devices were being produced. And he came home with the good news that we'd have to tool up with those gauges, and they worked on an air pressure process.
Oh, yeah.
I can't think of the name of them.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And that was a godsend. These shells, when they were ready to be inspected, anybody that inspected them, all of them, had to wear gloves.
They were that precise.
Yeah, well, didn't want any corrosion. No possibility of corrosion. And they had to be packed very carefully. Because they had the rotating band, we called it, and that was pure copper towards the tail end of it.
Yeah.
You probably know.
I've seen a picture of it.
Yeah. And they didn't want any finger marks on that at all. And if you had a little ding in it, you wrecked it.
Really?
Yeah, but we could put it back in the machine and they put the band on.
Yeah.
And run it around, and that band would expand.
Oh.
You could cut it off and put a new one. You could salvage it.
Yeah.
It wasn't a total loss.
Okay, so then you folks came to Lansing in 1945, was that, Bob?
Yeah, 1945.
Okay.
Trying to think of the time of the year. Had a terrible time trying to find a place to live in Lansing. Like my hometown in Janesville, there are no apartment buildings.
Yeah.
And but I was privileged to stay in the hotel until I could find one. and Oldsmobile paid for it.
Yeah. What was your initial assignment that they put you on?
Oh, the initial assignment was in press metal.
Okay.
Production engineering.
Oh,
And
who were you working for?
trying to think, who did I get the vote from?
Hanson.
Russ Hanson was the supervisor of that group,
All right.
or superintendent.
Yeah.
I think he was more than a supervisor because the dye room was under his control too. And Russ hadn't been there very long. John Dykstra got him to come from Hudson.
Oh, all right.
Or Dykstra came from Hudson.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, Dykstra started with,
Uh-huh.
well, the two of them grew up together as kids. And they both worked at Hudson. And Dykstra jumped first to Oldsmobile. And then, of course, Oldsmobile needed some fine tuning in the press metal operation. A lot of it. Shouldn't say that, but it got it anyway.
It's a fact. Yeah.
It got it anyway. And Russ was new on everything. I was pretty well acquainted with the procedures because I was in Lansing almost at least once every 2 weeks on business, on show business.
Sure, yeah.
And got to know people. Carl Fisher.
Who was Carl Fisher?
Well, Carl Fisher was one of Mr. Skinner's hand-picked ones from Turnstead, the same as, who was the other one? He quit Oldsmobile and moved and went with Westingham.
Oh, Burnham.
Don Burnham.
Don Burnham. Yeah.
Don Burnham and Carl Fisher
Yeah.
started at Turnstead.
Uh-huh.
And they were supposed to be the methods people.
All right.
And Carl got more into the machining part of it, and plant layout and methods was a growing baby at that time. And Burnham worked on that. And, used to have to talk about, Carl Fisher was a very honest man to deal with. We were having a terrible time trying to get a thread cutter. You remember I mentioned on the end of this armor-piercing shell, there was a nose, a V-shape, a cone-shaped nose that had to be screwed on. And here we had to take and cut threads in the finished body of the shell to screw this aluminum nose on. And of course, thread grinders were probably one of the most difficult machines to get your hands on. And working with Carl, we finally got one. And for our volume, we needed about 4 or 6. But we got one and learned how to use it without wrecking it, which is important. Worth its weight in gold. And but Carl was last I saw him at Oldsmobile, he was became the manager of the torch plant.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, and he wanted me to go over there instead of the job that I was on in press metal. I thought at the time I'd never make much progress there personally. Talked to Mr. Downey about it, and he says, "You're not going to go to the torch plant instead."
He solved the problem.
He solved it like that, and then it's because Carl Fisher quit and obtained an Oldsmobile dealership along with his brother in Detroit. They're still there.
Yeah. Okay.
One, they split, one of them's got Olds and the other one's got Buick.
But when you started work, Bob, after the war, and you were working in sheet metal,
Mhm.
did they just resurrect the old tools and dies and
Well,
restart that?
yeah, that's all we had.
That was basically a 41 or a 42
And
model.
those, yes, and they were stored outdoors
Oh my.
all during the war.
All the war.
I had to dig them out of the mud, clean them up, and try to make automobiles out of them. And that was a Herculean job.
Was it?
Herculean job because you might think a die is a pretty simple thing, but it is not.
Well, especially after sitting around for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, and especially Oldsmobile, to my knowledge, was renowned for making all of its own stampings.
They were.
Yes,
Mhm.
and that meant an awful lot of dies.
Yes.
Large, small, medium.
And a lot of presses, I assume.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Never enough presses,
Uh-huh.
but a lot of them. And so I was trying to get acquainted with the paper process, parts drawings coming from product engineering,
Mhm.
and the contact with the product designer himself, like Don Perkins.
Sure, yeah.
And keep in touch with Russ Hansen and constantly. And we had other operations there. There was Walt Campbell that was in charge of paint
Mhm.
from an engineering standpoint,
All right.
model changes and all of that, and colors and movement. And then Duke Osborne was a general,
Mhm.
quite a guy. He was in charge of setting up the standards for the car assembly plant.
Mhm.
And so we got a system set up for handling the paperwork
Okay.
in the office. This is finding out who's building, who's quoting the die, and you got to get 3 sources,
Mhm.
and we had records of all of that. I set them up, set all that
Okay.
stuff up,
Yeah.
and then we had to get a follow-up on some man that would go out, hopefully once a week. We wound up later on with 2 follow-up men, we call them. They called on each die shop to make sure the die shop wasn't working on a Ford set of dies
right.
instead of ours. And if they did, they got a hold of me. And they did before my time and got a hold of Russ Hansen. So
Mhm.
Russ and the expediter and myself, along with Lawrence Ginther, went over there and really straightened them out.
Mhm.
We snuck in the back door was wide open, so I walked in.
Where was the press shop, Bob, in those days?
Well, we had 85 sources.
Okay.
There are 85 die shops.
All right.
I won't tell you where that was.
No, that's all right.
They're all the same.
Yeah.
Crooks. With a
Yeah, okay. So you had a lot of
predators.
sources for your guys' tools.
85 kept track of them. And only in a critical emergency and with permission of management would we go to one source. But because Oldsmobile, well, in my mind, the first people to get into the die shops, because they got the car styled, they got the drawings, they got the models, mahogany models, and they got time to get as many quotes as they want. They're the first in, should be the first out.
Yeah.
And the die shop has a responsibility that way. It seems to me that Chrysler was always first.
Somehow, huh?
Yeah. Now that doesn't mean they would do only Chrysler work, because there's a lot of different stages. But then the next one in there was Ford, and then Cadillac, and then Oldsmobile.
Mm-hmm.
We were always last.
Mm-hmm.
I'd tell that to Mr. Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Always last. And it got merciful trying to get this stuff in on time, get it tried out. We were most fortunate in having one of the best diemen in the world, Lawrence Ginther,
Mm-hmm.
and Bob Ginther was one of the best die designers. He may have other problems. It certainly wasn't that.
Where did we make various parts out in the plant? What part of the plant, like, did we make fenders and hoods at? Do you remember?
I don't even remember the number. Most of the stampings were made, were.
In back of building 40 there?
Yeah, in back of building, it would be south
Yeah,
of building 40.
like 56, building 56.
56
Does that ring a bell?
Yeah. And then we had a small section up in Saginaw Street.
All right, yeah,
For bumpers.
yeah,
And front suspension. See, we used to
Okay.
make suspension parts.
yeah. The control arms and those things.
Yeah, yeah. And when we made the best ones, the corporation turned around and gave the whole job to Chevrolet.
Right.
Why, I would never know. And I would talk to Mr. Smith about that, although he wasn't on deck.
He wasn't around.
Yes, yeah, he could
He was
have
there
been.
somewhere.
He was there, but he was in the bookkeeping
Right.
department. But,
Well, okay, Bob, back up then to, go back to your 46, 47 time. You were in the, sheet metal organization
yeah,
and getting the car back running again that we had stored away over the war, during the whole war. Was there any, at that time, had they started work then on the new design cars that were going to come out in the late 40s?
well, I'm styling probably continued all through the war.
Okay, but you
And they
didn't,
were ready to go, and I really don't know the position
okay,
at that time of product engineering.
yeah,
Because they were involved in the war parts too.
sure,
Some of the, they made a lot of stuff, guns, cannons, and everything else.
yeah,
And all of that product engineering went through product engineering. Because I sat in a meeting with Mr. Wolfman was the manager of product engineering. Chief engineer, yes. And I was asked, well, they were trying to get some more tolerance on a shell on one of these bands. And I got called there. John Dykstra told me to get over there with him. And both of us made a mistake. You don't ask people like that, why am I going over there? I found out you should. But he should have told me. They were trying to get tolerance, and Jack Wolfram would have to be the one to make the claim.
mm-hmm.
I guess that's the way they operated.
Mhm.
And he finally looked at me. He says, well, Bob Russell, he says, how do you do that at our place? I said, well, we don't have those fancy lathes. All we got's common lathes, and we stick them in there and turn them. And using what's known as a shivving tool. Shivving.
Mm-hmm.
And it just peels it off like you peel a napkin.
Mm-hmm.
Only perfect, maybe in the wood. And they weren't doing that.
Mm. Okay.
And that's one of the correct changes we made to a machine that had been ordered by Lansing
Oh, yeah, okay.
from a miserable outfit in Cleveland. We called Donnie on the phone after I'd been there. I took a look at the machine, and they were going to do some size squeezing on this thing or something like that. can't directly remember what it is. And I took one look at it and I said, we're never going to hold the tenth of an thousandth of an inch tolerance on this. I said, put a cutting head on it. And he looked at me and I said, you do that. So he called Donnie. And Donnie told me a couple of days later when I got back home, he said that Dutchman wanted to know, Dutchman or Carp, I don't know what he called him, but that's about it. Want to know who that young kid is over there telling him how to make a machine tool. And he said, I didn't even give him your name. He says, I told him to make it the way you told him to. It's a darn good thing we did.
Yeah, because it worked.
It worked.
Yeah.
It was never going to work trying to squeeze that thing to a perfect shape because the metal's got to go somewhere.
Sure.
So.
Well, how long did you stay, Bob, then in the, what I'll call in the sheet metal engineering side of the house there then?
Until I was there, and then this new car assembly plant came up.
All right, okay.
And knowing a lot about car assembly. Donnie told me to get over there at the methods department and get going in it.
All right.
And then we were assigned to do the impossible, and that is put an efficient, an ultimate car assembly plant in a square. Put it in a rectangle.
Yeah.
And you bring in the material from the sides, put them together in the center, and feed them out.
Yeah. Just
like I did when I got that, whatever you call it, from school. That's what I did. As a school kid, I didn't do.
Yeah.
But we just couldn't get any more room.
Okay.
And there weren't any conveyors that could take a car around a half circle.
All right.
So we come up with a concept. If the car would stand it and not get damaged, of yanking them.
Dragging them sideways?
Dragging them sideways. Run them on a plate and then pull them. You saw that.
Oh, yeah, the old cross transfer.
Yeah. And, gee, we spent time on that. We had tractors at this conveyor outfit, and Don Perkins was highly involved in it. Because I insisted that he bring several cars down, and they had a setup right in the shop.
Yeah.
Well, and this is the biggest material handling shop in the world. And Don says that isn't going to bother the car at all. If that bothered the car, car is no good. Anyway, we turned around and walked away. We went back to Lansing and went to work on it. But.
And this was the new assembly plant that was going into building 32 and 75, that building up by the
horse barns, I call them. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's how they got there.
So this would have been like 48 or 49, somewhere in that time frame. I think that's when that went in.
Yeah, I can't.
Okay.
Yeah, about that time. And then I'm trying to think of the name of the superintendent there.
Minnow, was it Mike Minnow?
Mike Minnow.
Yeah, okay.
And he is a good man.
All right.
Very. And he wanted me to take his job because he was going to retire.
All right.
But we had a lot of fun in car assembly, and of course they made gas tanks there.
Was it the old car assembly plant prior to that one was up in the long building along Division Street there?
North and south.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Building 16.
That was a fire trap.
Yeah. Old wooden building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there was a gas tank, fuel tank assembly operation anywhere where they could come together.
Assembly plant. Bob, do you remember?
Yeah, Ed Ditto.
Okay.
Ed Ditto. But it got too big. Ed wanted to get a main drive shaft. I shouldn't mention names and things like this.
Oh, sure.
There's one option. They do it in a battleship.
Yeah.
Get one main drive shaft and run it run it the length.
Yeah,
And gear it up at the,
sure.
and, but that didn't seem to me to be very practical.
So you wanted to drive
And-
all the conveyors from one, in essence,
One drive shaft,
Uh-huh.
that's, if you had a good flood in Lansing, it'd be underwater.
Yeah,
And Mr. Donnie come out, I told him that we were having a heck of a time. We talked to a lot of conveyor people. And I can't think of the people that put the conveyor in. And, but they had done work in the Chevrolet plant that I was in. Work that we couldn't do in our plant engineering. But we did get a communication system built into it where you just can't have buttons all over the place because somebody's going to stop the line every second.
right.
And you have no efficiency. But you got to make sure that these different sections are all running and they're synchronized. And
Yes.
were you in Mike Minnow's office and see the control?
The big control panel.
Yeah.
Yes.
Had that made
Yeah.
so you could get it tied together. Or it'd be like a racehorse,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
pack of racehorses in a field. And I thought that was very interesting. And this company, they worked their heads off, and Donnie was right with them. True way to describe it. He was right on their tail.
Oh, yeah.
And boy, they worked night and day. The company did, and my gosh, essentially we got it started on time, and it was a miracle. See, the Chevrolet plant I was in was.
This is a recording of Robert P. Russell of Delray Beach, Florida. The recording was made on January 12th, 1989 by Jim Walkinshaw of the Oldsmobile History Center at Bob's home. This is tape number 2 of 2 tapes. Okay.
Well, I had a good experience on conveyors when we had to actually blast these pits out of the Chevrolet plant and put in a new conveyor system and an all-new wiring system.
Now, we didn't have to do that at our place, did we?
No, we had to put in a new wiring system to make shells in the Chevrolet plant in Janesville and Kansas City. And I worked with a Chevrolet electrical engineer on that, did the drafting.
Did Bob what was in that plant before we put the new assembly plant in it?
Well, as far as I can remember, they did some work on cars that were going to Europe.
Oh, shipping.
Shipping.
All right.
Shipping. I'm quite positive of that. Because they had to be disassembled in certain places. And
was that an all-open building, kinda, or did it have walls, or was it like a big shed, or?
It was like a big shed. If I'm not mistaken, I think I was on the second floor of that when during the war when I first went over there.
Oh, all right.
See, we moved away from Potosac and I. Potosac and I and the Chevrolet Kansas City fellows huddled in the second floor of that.
Okay.
Did you ever try to make a drawing and with heavy gloves on to keep them freezing and pencil?
Was that bad?
Well, that's where we got, yeah.
Okay.
But then spring came and we moved out.
What were some of the maybe the typical kinds of problems that you had making that new assembly plant go? Can you remember any what I would call just typical things of the day?
They were typical things of the day. We were able to put that test unit at the extreme end of it.
The test roll.
the test rolls,
Uh-huh.
yeah, which we didn't have before.
Okay.
And one thing that stuck in my crop, he's dead now, that's Mr. Skinner. When we laid it out, I had a pit right at the end of the main conveyor line,
Mm-hmm.
where you could go up there with a tool that we had made to bend the little arm that controlled the hydromatic shift lever
Oh, yeah,
under the floor.
yeah. They're like an operator's pit.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just go up there and just close it,
Yeah,
and that would bend this little forging
yeah,
where it should be, and then the car wouldn't creep.
okay.
And Mr. Skinner looked there, and that the table was as big as this porch, and that little black spot was about that long
Uh-huh.
to scale, you know. And he
Yeah.
says, "What's that black thing there?" And somebody had to blabber their mouth out. Well, that's where we're going to put the final touch on the dynamic transmission shift.
Uh-huh.
He says, "Take it out of there."
Why did he do that?
Well,
Huh.
because the wrong guy told him.
Uh,
I was going to say something, and I thought, "Oof, I'm not going to get into
Yeah.
this." Some blabbermouth.
huh.
Doesn't matter anyway. But we should have had that. Because, you know, people complain of that creeping. And it's all due to a forging. Just about like that.
Mm-hmm. Little small thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Little rocking horse.
Yeah.
But it had to be straight. Well,
Yeah.
so much for that.
Yeah.
But we seemed to take care of everything else. There was one big problem that we bumped into, that two problems. We were accused of spray painting paint inside the brake discs.
Oh,
We were accused of putting paint in. You know, we used to,
yeah. Chassis.
Yeah.
Chassis.
yeah,
Yeah.
they said that paint was getting inside the discs there, and they were losing braking power.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a real nut to crack. We went down to General Motors Research, and they had a machine, I can't remember the name of it, that could analyze any material.
Mm-hmm.
And we kept getting the same kind of stuff, and it looked like minute particles of dirt colored, and then black. There's black in there, and that's paint. It's got to be paint. Well, this thing got super critical, and finally got some guys up from Indiana or wherever makes the brake system. They've changed the names of the divisions and all that.
Delco Rain or something.
Yeah, Delco something, and small operation. But couldn't spend all day with them, and we weren't going any place, and nobody could tell us what this stuff was. If you don't know what it is, how do you know?
How can you stop it?
It's just like dirt.
Yeah.
The dust from the road could do it.
Yeah.
And it was getting in there. But I overheard two old timers from this shop that manufactured them. One of them said to the other, he says, "I told those people
Right.
that material that we're using in there is not strong enough. You know, the brake shoe
Yeah.
lining
Yeah.
isn't strong enough." And it wasn't.
Uh-huh.
And it was getting chewed up, and that's
Flaking off.
that was flaking off and coming in there.
Mhm.
But we get accused of spraying paint in there.
Sure. Yeah.
And I don't think you could spray paint in there if you stood with a spray gun for 3 hours.
You'd almost have to drown it.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
you can dunk it and get it. Then there was another problem where we were accused of not assembling fuel tanks properly. We were getting rust in the tanks. And Bob Cook entered this a little bit. And there was no, we changed from the hand torch and all that
Yeah,
and set it up, automated the darn thing. And did it with a high heat thing.
okay,
There wasn't any spray or anything like that. And nobody liked it. They didn't like the odor on it and everything, but it was better than some guy standing there with an open flame.
mm-hmm. It was a hot air sort of thing.
Yeah, and can't think of the trade name of the outfit that it was a heater,
Yeah,
a real heater, quick heater.
yeah,
And give the guy a little bucket, and when he got through, when it's set, throw some water on it and throw it
Sure.
in conveyor line.
yeah,
And they said that we were using the soldering material, and that was getting in the tank.
mm-hmm.
So we chased that around for about 2 months, and the heat getting coming down from the boss. You know, one night about 6 o'clock, I was so doggone mad. I went over there. I said, I'd like to go over there myself alone. I don't want anybody with me. And get it, and I saw a great big, huge package of parts made in Saginaw with the strainer
Mm-hmm.
and the bent tube.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, son of a gun, I wonder what's inside of the thing. So we had the die guy had well, I knew the die guy, he had a hacksaw, so we sawed it in two. And here's all this crud in the tube coming from Saginaw. And about that time, Bob Cook come up and he didn't believe it. He says, Bob, is that in there? And I said, yeah. And this guy worked for me, you know, with a hacksaw, and he sawed 4 or 5 of them. I picked them up, and they're all full of rust, corrosion.
So it wasn't from the tank.
It wasn't from, no,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't the gauge thing and that sucker and all of that.
I'll be darned.
And fortunately, Cook was there, so I didn't have to explain it to somebody in inspection. He was in inspection then, just starting out, but I knew Bob.
Yeah.
He was a real hot dog.
Mhm.
And boy, they got a hold of him over there, and Bob talked to him on the telephone.
Yeah.
I didn't hear it, but I heard what he said. The guy says that's impossible. He said, do you want me to, he said, let me come over and see it. And Bob Cook says, you can see them all right in your own backyard and front yard. And if you don't do something about it today, we're going to shut the car assembly line. And you know, Cook shut Fisher. He cut Fisher down.
Yeah.
We had a lot of trouble with Fisher.
Did you? Yeah.
And we talk about trouble. This was when I was in the car assembly plant. Don Burnham was running around. and we couldn't get the hood on the car straight.
Okay.
Wasn't straight, it was off to one side.
Yeah.
One side or the other, something like that, and we'd examined, we didn't have anything to examine the frames with.
Mm-hmm.
It had to be in the frame and or the body.
Okay.
And so I had a frame made in the tool room of those, and I could put it on a conveyor and drop it down on the frame.
Kind of a big fixture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just a jig.
Yeah.
And that thing was flopping around like a goat on a hillside. So then we made big ones and put them right outside where we stored the frames. And Mike Minnow went right along with it because his people were having a heck of a time. And Mr. Skinner caught them at first. They were cockeyed like that, and what they were doing, the front fender, the back of it, kind of curled under, you know?
Yes.
Well, they had a guy there with a sharp crowbar that would go up there and give it a yank.
Mm. To try and get it aligned or something?
And straighten it up better than it was, and
Yeah.
leaving a big torn hole in, and Mr. Skinner saw it. And then the trouble began.
Yeah, I can
And
imagine.
yeah, and that's when we had to do something about it. And then I said, boy, something's wrong. And then I was out there in the yard, and at the right time, about once a week, a guy had come from Mayo Smith in Milwaukee that makes frames.
Yeah.
Supposedly the best frames in the world. He's got a acetylene tank and a big sledgehammer, and he's banging around on frames because they were standing them on end.
All right.
And you know what they do in you train you.
Yeah.
Boom, boom,
Yeah.
pump 'em.
Yeah.
And that's what was wrecking them.
Oh my God.
So I thought, gee, these frames are all identical. We ought to be able to put one on top of the other on a flat surface. And you could do it.
Yeah.
But the surface has got to be flat.
Yeah.
So we put the gauges in there and we fixed that. And in the meantime, a fellow that I knew at the General Motors Institute in Flint, who was with Fisher, who made the front end panel, I think they call it. You know, the foot pedals go through it. And all.
The firewall, that part.
The firewall, yeah, that's called firewall too. And I said, do you have any kind of a drawing of what that's supposed to be? He says, yeah. He says, why? And I said, well, I'm trying to check something out here and see how it goes. And he says, well, I'll give you more than the drawing. I'll give you a copy of the drawing, and I'll send one of our fixtures over with you, to you. It's been checked. And geez, those holes were a half an inch out of position.
Oh my Lord, no wonder nothing fit.
Yeah. But Burnham was hysterical. And he wrecked a brand new body. We had a chief inspector there, and I told him once that in front of Downey in the office that we'd have a lot less trouble if he'd do his inspecting up in the assembly line instead of walking around out in back of the railroad tracks. And he got up and walked out of the office. And Downey says, gee, I thought you were a friend with him. I said, well, I'm a friend with him, but he doesn't do a very good job.
Yeah.
If you put junk in a car, that's what you're going to get off the end of the line.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
But they were fun times. We never got into the area, anything like that.
Then how long did you spend there, Bob, working in the car, that car assembly plant?
Well, until that got changed over to the methods department, we call it. You know.
All right.
And we even had time studies all set up on that. Duke never did. He just guessed it.
Yeah.
But trying to think of the name of the fellow in the methods department that made him up and made that guy. Big, tall, slender fellow.
Oh yeah, I know.
Should have used deodorant.
Yeah, I remember.
But he liked numbers.
Yeah.
And we had every job in the chassis line written up with an estimated time. Now that's what Chevrolet used to do.
And we had not done that previously at Oldsmobile?
No, never did anything.
Yeah.
You know, you talk about manpower and who's doing what and where do you put the table. And I thought if I'm going to get stuck with this car assembly plant, we want to know more about it.
Yeah.
Where does the body going to come down, and where does the front end come down? Where do the tires and wheels come in?
Sure.
And anyway, well, that's where I found out too. I was amazed that Chevrolet. I worked across the line from one of the guys that put the tires on the chassis.
All right.
See, they were carried on the chassis, and he put the wheels on.
Yeah. And
then the conveyor dived down, and then the tires carry the thing. Boom, the body goes on.
Yeah.
Well, of course, Chevrolet's tires all were about the same size.
Yeah.
The passenger cars, and he had about oh, 3/16 of an inch. And they're smaller than Oldsmobiles too. And all he had to do is get the thing rotated right. Just roll it along on this sheet that he had, and when the bolt was up here and the hole was coming around like he was pushing it, he put her on
slide the two together
and put a nut in there and bury it.
Yeah.
And that's not the way that you handle things to get them square.
All right.
See? And then we get to Oldsmobile, and the guys were bouncing them around like a kid bounces a ball. Did you ever see them do
I
that?
remember him doing that.
Yeah, they give it a good slam to go up in the air, and I thought, why didn't we do that in Janesville? But we did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, why didn't we? But I thought we had a heck of a time, and I was never too much on wrenches that didn't have any control to, because you know the guy can not squeeze it long enough, or he squeeze it too long,
Bust the bolt off,
and he's going to do one at a time, and if you're doing that to a front wheel or even a back one, you could get in an awful lawsuit.
Yeah.
So I thought, gee, that's pretty cute bouncing them up there. So I asked the guy, I said, and he'd always hit that thing. He'd have to move it, you know.
Yeah.
You just hit the top one and boom, he'd put her in there. Every time without a, and I thought, now if we could get a wrench that you could put the nuts in, what were there, five?
Five of
them, yeah. Put 5 nuts in there, and then you got all 5 of them right now. And you reduce the time from 5 to 1. And so I got a hold of this tool guy, and he was quite a guy, one of the biggest ones in the business.
Maybe Ingersoll Rand or.
No, he was over in the, well, he had a home over on the other side of Grand Rapids.
All right.
And he had a wife that he had a station wagon and carried her with him. All she could do was lay down in the station wagon. He's a wonderful fellow and would do anything. Yeah. And I said, gee, why don't we, could you make a machine that I can get you the parts and everything, the wheels and tires and the whole bit, and, you know, just get a main frame for this thing and put 5 of these wrenches in there. They aren't very big. Yeah. Put 5 of them in there, and sure, he says, I can do that. He says, Cadillac's monkeying around with it, but they can't get it to work. Oh. And I said, well, you got a job. and I should have patented it, but I didn't. I was working for General Motors anyway, and I signed that off. But, my gosh, within a week, he brought the tool over, but we couldn't get it to work because we had so much water in the air. And that was way up in the air. So then I had to go to that John Dykstra, who was, well, he got killed in an automobile accident. None. Got a hold of him. He didn't believe me, and I says, well, you better do something about it, because I'm going to get one of the plumbers out of the shop and open it up on you, and it's going to spray water all over the assembly line. And he says, okay. Turn around and walk from matter. Just matter than all get out. But anyway, we wound up with a great big drum about that long and about that diameter. Oh, wow. See, and got the golden moose. You hit that wrench and you could hear that thing 40 feet away.
Because that was your storage tank, kind of.
Yeah. And it worked. Yeah. And the wrench, it was heavy and everything, but it was all on a balancer. Yeah. So we got that fixed up in a hurry. So that was the first multiple spindle wrench that we tried. And the guy told me, he says, you know, Bobby says, if you can, I don't know how that's just going to be handled. I says, well, I'm not going to get anything into it anyway. About that time, we were starting to commence to get into aluminum parts. Remember that aluminum engine job?
Oh, yeah, 1961
Yeah,
it was.
yeah. Now aluminum is not stable.
Yeah, very active.
And of course even before that, we got multiple spindles to put the heads on the blocks on our steel iron engines. And I said, we're going to have to do that with this aluminum to measure, because they're going to curl up. And so I got a hold of the chief inspector then. Can't remember.
Williams.
No, he was
Herky.
Well, Ed worked for him.
All right.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
And he agreed that he and product engineering agreed that they would accept pressure on these cylinder heads when they're being gauged. They got to, because that's the way they're going to run on the engine anyway. Yeah. So they didn't have any argument. So we did that. Same darn thing. But it was all a lot of fun.
So now all this time, Bob, you were in what? Would that have been the methods department at that time? Is that what that was?
Yeah, that was all the methods. But then in '54, I got the job. Oh, we were in another war then or something.
Yeah, there was the Korean War.
Yeah, Korean War came along, and Pete Mitchell and I reported to Frank Hager.
Old Frank Hager.
Old Frank, senior.
Yeah.
Quite a guy.
Yeah.
And he was a wonderful guy. I didn't mind working for him at all. And his son, Frank Jr., worked for me.
And he later was the tool room superintendent.
Yeah. Perfect guy. Yeah. And anyway, we got into the shell manufacturing, or cannon.
Yeah, the big
back into the big cannon.
Yeah, the big cannons. I remember. Yeah.
And I got Pete was more of a manufacturing tooling engineer than I was. He was a tool maker and everything else. I never was a tool maker. But I knew something about machines. And old Frank says, we're going to split this thing. Bob, you do this, and Pete, you do that. And Pete and I have been real close friends. Now he's over on the other coast.
I talked to Pete up in his house on Higgins
the lake. Oh yeah. Well, he got a place down here too. We talk with each other on the phone. Yeah. That's neither here nor there. But we went at it, and
what did you have? What part were you working on? Do you remember, Bob?
Well, working with the government to get the machines to start with. We had to get the big lathes. Huge.
Oh, I remember those babies.
Yeah. And those were huge, very long cannons.
Yes.
They weren't the same. They were a lot longer than the World War II ones.
Right.
They were quite an improvement.
Yeah, they must have been 20 feet long.
Yeah, they were real long. And we looked them up and got them installed, and see, there's something else in there. Oh, I was with Russ Hansen, quite a long time.
Yes.
Down to styling and all of that.
In the press area.
Yeah, yeah. We'd be down to styling at least once a week.
Were you? Okay.
Yeah. You got to go down there. They want you down and see whether they can got a chance of making the thing, or if you can't, change it. We'll approve it or disapprove it.
Yeah.
And then, so I was into that quite a bit too. The Korean thing didn't last very long.
No.
We had a jet engine job too.
At Plant 3.
Yeah.
We built Plant 3 sort of for that, I believe.
Yeah. Government. Yeah. I'll let it go.
Yeah.
And Dakin didn't put in enough floor, did he? But that conveyor was a mess. I presented that to, I thought it was going to get fired.
Which one was that, Bob? What conveyor?
The, what's the name of it for handling bumpers, plated bumpers?
Oh, okay, that power and free.
Power and free conveyor,
Oh, right.
yeah.
Yeah, plant 3. Uh-huh.
It seemed to me in all the times that I was around that plant, the bumper you wanted, you couldn't find.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the ones you found had a ding in it and all of that. So instead of just handling them like matchsticks, treat them properly.
Yeah.
And so I thought power and free would be a marvelous application.
Mm-hmm.
Now that comes out of that big outfit that did the testing on pulling car side.
That was Jarvis D. Webb then, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, I can't think. No, Webb put the conveyor in.
Yeah.
But I thought it was
okay.
a material handling outfit.
All right, somebody else.
Yeah.
All right.
But they quit monkeying around with making little carts and all that, and got into the power and free system all over the world.
Yeah.
And it seemed to me to work. Well, one thing happened. It seems we had to have another washer up in the air because that's where the traffic was flowing.
Okay.
Somebody had to have that. I won't mention his name, but we put it in. And anything you got up in the air like that, you got to put some posts under it to hold it.
Yeah, sure do. Plus a washer's a heavy thing.
Yeah,
water in
and
it.
very, very heavy.
Yeah.
And it's full of water and everything else. And then I found out that there was no way that we could get this conveyor to take the route we wanted to take because the building wasn't big enough. So I went to Downey and I said, we can go north, we can go south, we can go east, we can go west, but we can only go one direction at a time. He says, well, what's your problem? And I says, I'm asking you for a hump on the north end of that building.
Mm.
He says, put it in and don't say anything about it. So we did.
That's when we built that shed, kind of.
Yeah, that's what that's for.
Hey, we're back on.
Yeah, but the problem, the major problem was financial.
Oh.
And we had an estimate made of $16 million for that whole thing. Yeah, that includes the plating thing where Burnham got his job from.
Yeah. And all of the machinery and all of the conveyors.
Yeah, and well, you had to move all the presses, that were making suspension parts, and some of the crankshaft stuff had to get moved too for some room. And 16, and Don Burnham took it to the powers to be, and he says no. And then he says, it can't be over 14. I said, well, I don't know how it could be done for that amount of money. We got too much going here. We were plating bumpers for Buick, for Pete's sake, and ourselves too. And we've been down to Chevrolet, and their outfit was 10 times worse than our old one ever was. Terrible. And so Don went away, he was kind of mad. He says, well, we got to live with that figure. And Herbie Holmes, you remember Herbie?
Sure. Yeah.
Well, he was the one keeping track of the purchase orders that were going out. And somebody was dragging on the purchase orders or something, and Herb didn't get the numbers. And anyway, one day I had to go to Detroit, or out of town. I don't know where I even went. When I come back, Dick Whiters was almost crying. And I said, "What's the matter, Dick?" And he says that Burnham changed the number on that request for authorization by $2 million.
Hmm.
And of course, my name was on it.
Yeah.
Everybody's name was on it,
Oh,
except Burnham's,
yeah.
I suppose. And of course, boy, when the accounting department caught up to it, all hell broke loose.
Hmm.
And I thought I was going to get fired. On top of everything else, the dummies that lubricate conveyors didn't ask the conveyor people what kind of lubricants you should use on the wheels. And they just put the common oil in,
Mm-hmm.
ruined every wheel on the entire system. And they had to be replaced.
Gracious sake.
It was the worst mess I was ever in.
Yeah.
And Wolfram was wild and about the over. And Herb Holmes was down at the corporation handling ours,
Yeah.
2 million overrun, and here Buick was getting a new engine plant, and they had a $4 million overrun, and nobody was paying any attention to it.
Yeah.
And Herb says, if you don't believe it, just tell me. There's one of those hot dogs.
Yeah.
No, that isn't the real one. The real one's got 4 engines on the back. They run 60 to 80 miles an hour.
Yeah. Like he's been on Geneva.
Yeah, it's but anyway, I went up to Mr. Donnie's office and told him, I says, I think I'm being accused of being in a hell of a mess. I said, I'll retire right now or take a transfer if I can get one.
Yeah.
I could have got a job at Bottle Sack anytime.
Sure. Yeah.
We never had any screw ups like that where I came from. Never. And unfortunately, there was a nice fellow in accounting. He's been dead now several years, 4 or 5 years. That lived over in
Niehaus. John Niehaus?
No,
Oh.
no, I know Jim. No, well, that's beside the point.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think he just quit.
Yeah.
Being a bookkeeper, he wasn't making enough money to
Yeah.
retire. Anyway, he got on.
Yeah.
But Wolfram blamed him.
Did
Yeah, and I think he blamed me too for giving him a bum figure. He says on the map, when on the chart, the layout we were showing him, he says, "Well, how much is this going to cost?" And I said, "Well, Plant Engineering tells me that this conveyor is $12 a foot." I should have known better. Put in hundreds of feet of conveyors, conventional conveyors, in Janesville for $5. I knew that just as well. And the $12 seemed funny to me, but I thought, well, they got all that steel up there that the conveyor has, that's just riding along with the tanks and stuff. So, but I didn't get it in writing. And that's Stu
Rudder.
Stu of he's a nothing.
Yeah. Stu Rudder.
But then Bill Rasmussen came in, wonderful plant engineer.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And then what's the young fellow's name after?
Walt Sparrow.
Walt Sparrow.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And here we get stuck with that meathead.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I wasn't feeling very well for some time with the back. I'm doing pretty well here, but I'll pay the piper. With this moving around and all, and then the stress and everything. But I got the tens unit, and I get about 3 of them a week.
When did you retire, Bob?
I retired in 1972.
1972.
Yeah, and I had to wait a year.
Okay.
And something was cooking, see.
Yeah.
And but I got a letter from them up in the Mayo Clinic.
Yeah.
That just total exhaustion.
Yeah.
I burned out.
Yeah.
And the back was killing me.
Where did you weren't in Methods when you retired, were you? Where?
No, I had pressed
You
metal.
were back in the sheet metal plant.
Yeah,
All right.
I was going to say, you know, when Frank's senior retired,
Frank Hager.
Retired, I had machining and press metal.
Okay. There was a period of time where you did it both.
Yeah. And the Methods kid moved me out of the corner. I was in between them.
Yeah.
And they wanted a conference. But I got that in 1954.
Oh, all right.
I had both of them. And then they tried to dump the forge plant on me.
Oh, wow.
And Lord, I had a heck of a time. You know, Lyle Salisbury was over there and near the forge plant and was trouble enough trying to get over there with him and the crankshaft department and then go to the forge plant. I'd been there. What the heck is his name? We set the forge plant up the last time it got set up for automobile crankshafts and connecting rods. And criminy, we had to go down to the corporation and show some senior guy what the layout was and what we were doing, and we had a little automation there to get the darn ingot around the corner.
Sure.
And that's where I don't think he'll ever forgive me. Of course, he's in heaven or hell now. I got an idea which one it is. What was your boss's name there?
Bob Mooney?
Bob Mooney.
Bob Mooney.
Bob Mooney thought I was penalizing him. He let me know at the retirement party they had. He said, "You're the guy that put me in the forge plant." Well, I thought I was doing him a great favor, a great favor. Because if he walked down into the middle of the engine plant, he wouldn't be able to do anything. But I found out later on his father ran a forge plant for somebody.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
In the corporation, either that or a foundry, which. But we had a fellow over there that I think was goofing off too much. And we couldn't be there to keep track of it all the time. And I don't know how I got mixed up with the Ford plant anyway. Except Carl Fisher wanted me to come over there and take the job. Job, but that was years before.
Yes.
The other thing, I think. Well,
Bob, what do you think over all that time that you were there was perhaps the most interesting period you had?
What was?
Yes.
Well, it was all interesting.
It was. Didn't have something that you felt was more so than others.
No.
All right.
Of course, graduating from that school was something.
Yes.
Because that was tough. Yeah. I don't know what it is now. It amazes me. Years ago, someone come weeping to me. They said, "We got a kid out there. I think it was in press metal. And out there, and you can't read a blueprint." And I said, "Well, who is he?" And he pointed him out to me. And I checked, and somebody had sent him to our department. He couldn't even read a blueprint. So I said, "Well, I'm not going to, we can't use him."
Yeah.
So I said, "Ask him if he can read a blueprint or if he can do some drafting. He can do that and learn a lot. He's pretty good doing that stuff." And the next thing I know, the kid was gone.
Mm-hmm.
But wouldn't you think that instead of assigning him in there, they would,
Check it out.
what could he do?
Yeah.
First time he put his foot in the plant, I'll never forget what the most exciting thing was walking out of the Chevrolet plant the first day. I could get down there.
Yeah.
Because an escort was taken.
Sure.
But geez, when the whistle blew, everybody's going like this. I said, how am I going to get out of this place?
Mm-hmm.
See, we had stuff stored so high that
Oh,
you wouldn't believe it.
yeah. Who was your most interesting boss, Bob?
Oh, Russ Hanson.
Why?
Well, the big boss would be Dunn, of
Okay.
course.
Yeah.
Then Russ Hanson.
Okay.
Well, they both knew their business.
Okay.
And they had good personalities, as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And
How did Russ Hanson manage the business? How did he?
the business part of it,
Yeah.
well, I set it up. I think he had only been there several months, and the place was in chaos.
Yeah.
There weren't any die designs. There were no process sheets. So the best thing that happened to us, and I'm saying us, when I went with him, they had that strike, you know.
Yes.
And he and Farmer Gustafson and myself were allowed to take it with us. And we went out to that Holloway outfit, and we were there for weeks.
During the strike?
During the strike, and we wrote down the process sheets.
All right.
By hand.
So that gave you enough time to get that all done before you got
Yeah, you asked the question about that, and that didn't come to mind.
Yeah.
And Gus was there before, and before the war.
Yeah.
And he would know some of those parts, so we could use some of the old original ones.
Mm-hmm.
He would know,
Yeah.
but he was the only one that could.
Yeah.
And boy, that saved a lot of time.
Sure.
The big problem came is when they started into production like that.
Yes.
To produce good parts.
Mm-hmm.
You can make a part,
Yeah.
but it's something else to make a good part.
Yeah.
And we had a horrible time with that. And I finally wound up spending most of my time on the floor, and that's how I met Lawrence Kinter.
Mm-hmm.
He was just a foreman.
Mm-hmm.
And Lawrence knew what I was trying to do. There's no sense in we had not a very good superintendent of stamping.
Mm-hmm.
Just.
Who was that person? You remember his name?
No, I wouldn't remember. He got an early retirement.
Did he? Okay. It was before my time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be talking about
No,
that
that's
stuff
okay.
anyway.
Yeah, that's all right.
But that's why, you see, Bob Rollis was put in that thing
Yes.
to get an intelligent sequence of schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to have a die that will run in either of at least two presses. Every stamping has to have a die that does that. That affects the die design.
Sure does. Does it go up
in a
there?
great big way. Yeah. And Bob started to get the schedule, and then they could go in and what are you going to run tomorrow? And he says, well, I think we're going to run this. Well, I'd be running around out in the yard and in the die room, and then we'd have each day we'd get about 6 dies back into business again. But man, there must have been a lot more dies than 6.
Sure were.
And then I'd find out which ones they were working on and which dies were the closest to being completed to the best of our ability. And I'd run to Rollis and tell him, geez, please run this stuff. This is the way we had to work. Murder. Just murder. Because you break one of those dies in two, you aren't gonna
Oh.
get a part for
Yeah.
a week, and I don't
Yeah.
care who makes it.
Yeah.
You work around the clock. It's really something, but, was all I'm so glad. My best friend that I went through high school with and grew up with and all that, and went to the University of Wisconsin with, he continued in law.
Mhm.
And when I used to get back home to Janesville, Wisconsin, I used to go in and visit him. And he used to tell me the stories of all the 99% of the case, 100% of the cases, and 99% of it, because a lot of it had to do with real estate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he picked up so much money he didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
But he died with a heart attack at 50.
Yeah. A little different.
Yeah. And he got the job that I could have had there was Doherty and somebody else. Doherty was a friend of my father.
Mhm.
And I could have, done the bill collecting
Sure,
for them. That's the
Yeah.
way you start
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
In fact, I did one summer.
Did you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
during the Depression. I walked all over this town, river town, zigzagging around, and I collected one $5 bill.
Oh my goodness.
That's how bad things
Yeah,
were. See,
yeah.
Parker Pen was there.
Yeah.
Nobody's buying pens,
No. Everybody was broke.
you know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, Bob, what do you think? You think we
Well,
pretty
I
well
think
covered that
Yeah, I
waterfront?
think so. And
Gosh, that's great.
well, I've done a lot of yakking here.
Oh, well, that's beautiful.
You can
It's,
cut that out.
Oh, I mean, that's excellent. You did a
But
fine job.
All I could think of at that, that farewell thing was say thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of guys, a lot of die shop people.
Yeah.
That came in, machine tool people
Sure.
too.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess I'll shut that thing off then.
Okay, and I enjoyed this.